Hello again, everyone. Today I'll be doing another coaching session for a summoner named Solo Player Only from EUW. I will firstly discuss my new method of presenting the information in the video known as macro tips. Macro tips is my own constructed term given to those numbered information which will describe the game knowledge which can be placed into each game in order to improve your play. This specific tips will not only improve your game knowledge in a specific game to apply it, but rather will improve your game knowledge as a whole. These will be arranged in a numbered format and it will be presented in a Word document which I will prepare prior to the construction of the video. So, for the game which it has been played by solo player only, it can be seen by this image which shows the team compositions for both teams, that is the enemy team and the ally team. What I'm going to do is analyze all of the macro tips which I have given in this Word document, and I will expand slightly on them. But at the same time try to keep the information as condensed as possible in order to improve the summoner's play. Before I get into these macro tips, I will want to discuss your runes. For your rune setup, everything is correct in this rune page, except I would recommend instead of getting the shield rune, I would rather you prefer to get the middle rune here as a secondary rune. The reason for this is because this shield rune provides healing to allies that attack the enemies who are CC'd or rather crowd controlled by your abilities. However, this is more of a supporting rune, as it is better to take this rune which will provide you with more armor, if I recall. Your other runes are fine, except I recommend in the domination tree you should be taking, instead of this secondary rune, you should be taking Zombie Ward, as if you are taking Zombie Ward, you are able to apply an extra set of wards when your wards expire. That is what the potential of Zombie Ward rune can do. In addition to this, I will also say that instead of taking this secondary rune, it is better that you take this secondary rune, as if I recall, each time you kill an enemy champion, or rather you get a unique takedown given by assist, you will be able to get an increase in movement speed, and Rammus benefits very heavily from movement speed, as in this replay you do play Rammus. Rammus is a very good champion for climbing solo queue simply due to his very easy kit and his high crowd control. So, I will now go into the macro tips. For the first macro tip, I will need to discuss this before we get into the actual replay. After I discuss the first tip, I will follow through with the replay analysis. This first tip is what is known as the pre-game analysis and game plan. This macro tip is the most important tip. I cannot emphasize it enough. This tip is extremely important for junglers. If you are able to apply this series of tips in this one macro tip, you will be able to improve your play as a whole, which is a guarantee. So I'll now look into what exactly this macro tip means. It is the determination of the enemy and allied champion power spikes and playstyles. It heavily focuses on the game knowledge which you have of all champions in the game, as you're able to apply it to your team and the enemy team. Similarly, as if you are to apply the positions that the enemy laners will be pushed up in the lane, most likely, same with your laners. This will enable you to take different pathings, as well as you will be able to secure ganks more easily in certain situations, or even protect your laners given that you are aware that they are going to be pushed up to the enemy territory frequently. So to look into these singular tips, I recommend that you gank lanes to snowball your ally assassins against very prone to gank enemy mid laners. In this situation of the replay, this happens in mid lane where your ally assassin is Fizz and the enemy laner, which is very prone to ganks, is Yasuo. The reason why I say the enemy laner is very prone to ganks is because Yasuo has a very high need to dive in to your territory, as Yasuo dashes in order to take damage onto your ally. So he's very prone to ganks. And so Not only this, but you are able to also get your assassin ahead, and getting your assassin snowballing, which is the term given to an ally which is able to take a large amount of kills and apply pressure across the entire map. This is essentially very good on an assassin, as they do high amounts of burst damage per few seconds. And so I recommend you should, in this specific replay and even in other games, apply this macro tip part of the entire tip. Secondly, I say that you should avoid ganking certain lanes before your allies are level 6, as enemies are much more vulnerable to dying due to large amounts of crowd control and survivability. In this specific replay, this applies to your bottom lane, where Janna and Varus have ultimates at level 6 which are greater than the enemy team, which in the specific replay, the enemies are Bard and Vayne, which their level 6s aren't as powerful as Janna and Varus combined with Eramis' taunt, knockup, and ultimate. And so you should apply this part of the macro tip. So thirdly, you should gank certain lanes only if the enemy which has high mobility, has used their mobility, or is extremely overextended. In this specific replay, this applies to top lane, where the enemy laner is Riven. Riven has very high mobility, and so she is able to escape ganks very easily once she sees you on wards, or even if she sees you on a ward, there's a likelihood that she can get away if she hasn't already used her cooldowns. When she uses her cooldown, she isn't able to get away, since she cannot spam her Q to get away from your gank. And so, in this specific replay, I suggest that you should only focus on ganking top, given that they use their cooldowns or that they are extremely overextended. If they're extremely overextended, you're likely to get a very effective gank off. Next, I will talk about the fourth tip in the entire macro tip of pre-game analysis and game plan, where I suggest you protect lanes or a lane by using normal wards as well as control wards in the respective river bushes or enemy bottom jungle, with care in order to protect the lane which is more vulnerable to ganks given your less pressure. In this specific replay, this applies to bottom lane. The specific wards that you place will turn into zombie wards if you take the rune that I mentioned, and this less amount of pressure will be pre-6 for bottom lane, as you are not as effective in ganking bottom lane prior to level 6, given that the allies do not have these ultimates or hard CC and survivability. And so in each game, you should analyze which lanes do I gank, which lanes do I protect, which lanes do I control as a whole, and which lanes do I counter gank if I know that this lane is going to be heavily focused by the enemy jungler, given that they are prone to ganks, similarly as with Yasuo. And so this is a very important macro tip. Fifthly, in the entire pre-game analysis and game plan macro tip, I suggest you use your abilities mostly either on the strongest enemy or those engaging on your back line. In the specific replay that I am analyzing, there are many divers on the enemy team. This includes Riven, Yasuo, and even Bard can dive on the back line. However, mostly I would think you should use this CC on either Yavon or onto Riven, because they have the highest engaged potential. Next, I suggest you choose appropriate runes for the respective champion. I've already discussed the runes which you should make changes to. I'll lastly talk about the last part of the entire macro tip, pre-game analysis and game plan, where I say you should track the enemy jungler to counter jungle or counter gank. This is a more advanced technique, so I do not think you should put so much emphasis on it at the moment. For each of these macro tips, as I have discussed in a previous video I recommended, you need to focus on each of these parts of the entire macro tip in each game, meaning that on a set of games you should focus on some of these macro tip points of the entire macro tip, and this should happen for like at least 5 games. Then you repeat the process with other tips. So you should not focus on several different things at once, as this will hinder your progress. I'll now talk about the second macro tip, which will take us into the replay analysis. So I see that you place a ward in the bush here, which is very good. As you can see here, you have all your cooldowns off and you are not kiting the camp as I have mentioned here. If you kite your camp when your abilities are on cooldown in direction of your clearing for efficiency and clear camps effectively to increase speed and decrease HP loss. What I mean by this is when your spells are on cooldown, you should move the camp in the direction that you're going to move next. If you're going to go from clearing your red buff, then to clear your raptors, you should kite the camp by moving backwards and auto-attacking when your spells are on cooldown towards the raptor camp. This will ensure you have more HP and you're increasing your speed and therefore your efficiency. As with Rammus, this is with Rammus W. As with Rammus, I will next talk about when you are clearing. This is more of a micro tip than a macro tip. You powerball into the creeps. You do not powerball in the center, and therefore you're only knocking up about 2 of the raptors out of the total of 4 mini and 1 big. And so you should go into the center of the raptor camp. In the center here, use your Q, then your W, so you're able to hit all the raptors, and therefore you're improving your efficiency on clearing the camp. I will talk about this specific kiting mechanism, which could also assist in you taking less HP in this section of the video. You're taking the camp. You look to be trying to kite it, but you end up not kiting it. Your spell comes on cooldown, but when it was on cooldown, you should have been kiting backwards. And therefore you would be more stocked up on HP. You end up smiting the camp. Given that you would kite the camp, you would not be so low on HP to have to smite the camp. And therefore you have to save it for another camp. I'll now talk about the macro tip second, which I have placed there. I believe it is right at this moment. Right. At the start of the game, you need to acknowledge where did the enemy jungler start. We can see where the enemy jungler started since you have the Fog of War off. However, you were not to know this if you did not. So what you have to do is you need to see which lane comes the latest out of all lanes. As you can see, bottom lane is going to come the latest, meaning that Yaban started on his blue buff. Because you know that he started on his blue buff, this means that he's going to appear topside around the same time that you appear topside. So even given that you did not see Yaban at the camp, at clearing Scuttle right here, given that you mentioned it was a bug, you should have already known that he could have been near top. And so you need to be careful with your ganking. The gank does end up being successful and you get the kill. However, you need to take into fact the position of the enemy jungler in the early game, given that you know where they started at the Pacific laner's position. You must use this to your advantage. This can even be used in the future not only to hear, but you can maybe take the camps of the enemy jungler by invading. If you know where they're positioned, you might be able to take an objective. There's several implementations. I will now discuss another macro tip, which I mentioned at number 4. Sorry about that. I see here you stumble to seem to be going to gank mid. However, you are still level 2 and there's no point trying to gank mid at this specific point because you only have 2 of your abilities and you don't have your hard CC through your E, which is your taunt, and so you will very likely not to get a successful gank off there. The max you will get is probably a flash and it's not worth it. And so I say avoid making unnecessary movements which will decrease your efficiency by nature of time wasted. Be quick in your decision making and follow through only if you're confident in the play. This is linked to never consider ganking a lane prior to level 3 as a jungler, as cheesing doesn't win games. What I mean by cheesing is you're trying to get a kill when it's not a guaranteed kill. It's better to plan your ganks. So this is linked to this, meaning that you will have more efficiency if you're not delaying your movements. As you see, you kind of just stumble back and forth here for no reason. We're wasting time. You need to be very efficient as a jungler. And so numbers 5 and 4 are very important macro tips. Next, I will talk about an invade, which you do near the start of the game after getting a kill onto Ribbon. You end up taking Scuttle Crab. This is fine because you want to protect your mid laner from any ganks. However, you end up going to try and counter jungle Yavin. You are aware that Yavin was top recently, so you might think that Yavin is going to go to blue side, to his blue buff. But this is not guaranteed. What you need to do is you need to look at the Pacific jungler's camp clears. By doing this, you press the scoreboard and you check to see how much CS count they have at a specific point in the early game. This is most being able to track any early game because they are not going to clear waves of minions at towers in the early game, so they'll only clear their jungle camps. Each jungle camp in Season 8 or Pre-Season 7 is worth 4 CS. So you have to do the math in order to determine how many camps they've cleared once you know the information of where they have started in the first place. So if they have 24 CS, that means they cleared the entire jungle from start to finish in the early game. If they have cleared only 5 of the camps, excluding their golems, if they're starting from blue, that means that they have cleared with 20 CS. And so you need to track the jungler CS. And so if you had tracked the jungler CS in this situation, you would have found out that his red buff is up and his golems are up. In this situation, he would have most likely had, because of the 4 CS per camp, he would have most likely had 16 CS at this point if he had taken his Raptor camp and not taken his red and his golems. And so you can determine from that where he has not cleared. You end up trying to take his camp, however, you do not apply this knowledge, and because of that, you end up wasting time in this specific point trying to clear the camp and trying to evade him. He literally sees you directly next to him and he doesn't react. So what I mentioned is this will not work in a solo queue ranked game of higher rank. This is only happening in flex where people aren't concentrating as much. And so I say you should avoid making risky counter jungles on junglers that have slow clears. This is another point of the macro tip as a whole. I would say Rammus, as opposed to Warwick has very slow clears. Warwick has fast clears, but Rammus has slower clears, given the fact that Rammus doesn't have any boost in his damage with his auto attacks besides his W, which is nothing compared to Warwick, who has his passive where he does more auto attacks through his W quicker the lower the HP, and his Q, which is able to chunk the camp's HP. And so you need to also monitor the Pacific champion and their clear speed if you're going to counter jungle a champion, given that you are not 100% sure where they are and you want to clear it quickly. It's also good that you take Smite, have Smite up when you're going to counter jungle so you're able to secure the camp. I'm not 100% sure if you had Smite in this situation, however, you should always have your Smite up. Yes, you do have it up, but that's only because you end up stumbling, going back and forth to take the camp. Minus a pallet if you did not waste time in this situation. You end up getting the camp in the end, however, this will never happen in a ranked solo queue game of a higher rank. Trust me. Another thing I realize you do is in number 7. In number 7, you end up, before actually going to invade the camp, and after you have taken Scuttle Crab, you end up hitting the vision plant. By hitting the vision plant, you are not the only person who can see this vision plant being hit. Your enemies can also see the vision plant being hit. As you can see, the enemy pings where you are, and even pings a question mark ping because he knows that you are probably going to take his camp. Even though this is a flex game, he's aware to that extent that you are probably going to try and invade him. And so you should not hit the vision plant when you're going to invade enemy jungler if you don't know where they are precisely. I'll now go on to the rest of the macro tips. The next macro tip involves always considering the location, HP, mana, and cooldowns of your ally, as well as minion placements and ganking route taken prior to executing a gank. What I mean by this is you need to consider the HP of your ally. Firstly, as you can see here, your ally is very low on HP. He does not have mana to monitor, as in mentioned here. However, his HP is very low. Not only that, but his location is very far away from the enemy, and so you are likely to not get a successful gank off at all there. This is not only for HP, mana, and location of your ally, however, they may also use their cooldowns given that they have high crowd control abilities, and so you might not be able to get a gank efficiently off. In addition to this, you need to monitor minion placements. If the minion wave, let's say the minion wave, instead of being in the specific position of up here, it was closer to here, the possibility of you getting a gank is slim if the minions are very close to the enemy tower. Not only that, with the Powerball, you need to maneuver around minions to be able to get the knockup off successfully. So you need to monitor minion placements. You should not be trekking to try and gank a lane that is very pushed up if the minions are very pushed up. Minion placements allow you to determine if you can gank a lane or not. And so you need to consider all of this information prior to securing a gank. I'll look at 550 to show you what is the result of this gank, given that you did not monitor the HP of your ally. He ends up getting executed. Not only that, but you end up getting no kill, and you also end up dying. You have given the enemy 1 kill, however they could have gotten 2 kills given that they had auto-attacked Mundo, and so you need to take all this information to account. This is a huge mistake. There's a reason I'm emphasizing this, because you need to take all this information to account when you're executing a gank. Rammus has very strong ganks also when you path from behind. You shouldn't be pathing from the river up over here. Instead, you should be pathing, as on the map, into the tri-bush and around. By doing this, you're able to get a more secure gank off. This applies to all areas of the map. If you were for mid lane, if you wanted to gank the Yasuo, you would want to rather gank around the Pacific wall instead of going directly through the bush to gank him. Same over here. In all situations, you want to gank from behind as Rammus. You'll get much more successful ganks off. Not only to Rammus, but other junglers, this also can be successful, but this mostly applies to Rammus. Similarly, you might be able to hit the red plant and jump over. This will improve your distance covered and your pathing if you were on this side of the map. Addition to this, if you, let's say you were ganking this lane and the enemies were all the way pushed up here and you wanted to gank them, it's best that you gank them from behind. So you go through the tri-bush and gank from behind with your Powerball. So you need to take into account the specific pathing of your ganks. I'll now look at your specific clearing of camps. I need to locate when this happens. So you end up going back to take your red buff, which is okay. However, I realize you path upward and you don't end up taking your golems at all. You haven't cleared your golems for the entire game yet. And so you should always clear all your camps if you're in a location that allows it to ensure efficient jungle pathing and clearing of your camps. I'll now talk about the next macro tip. I believe it happens after you end up clearing these camps. You take Scuttle Crab. Then you see Yavin here. You ping your laners to try and kill Yavin, which is fine. This is perfectly fine for you to get this kill off. However, instead of going to try and execute a successful tower dive, you instead go to clear Gromp, if I recall. I understand you're trying to take away camps from the enemy. However, if your laners were to appear here, after they appear here, you can abort killing Gromp and go to try and dive the vein. If you're able to dive the vein, you might even be able to get a kill off, and you might even be able to get a tower. The bard will not be able to protect the tower in that situation. And another reason why I recommend that you should tower dive is because you're playing a tanky jungler with hard crowd control. Rammus can very easily execute tower dives because of this. And so instead of taking the Gromp, you should have taken the tower by tower diving, killing Vayne, and then that would have been much more successful. If you get a kill and a tower, it is much more valuable than taking just Gromp. Taking towers snowballs not only your bottom laners, but also applies this lead to your entire team. Tower Gold is very effective in snowballing your lead. I'll now talk about your ward placement in your own jungle here. You ended up placing a ward right here when there's no actual reason to place a ward here, because you know that Yavin had either died earlier over here, and so there's no way he could have pathed all the way down to your wolves in that specific period of time. You need to take into account the amount of time an enemy champion can reach a specific location on the map, and relative to that you can make specific situations work. Similarly, you might not know where Yasuo is, however, it's very unlikely that he's going to path here. And even if he did path here, you have Fizz to help you. And you know where Riven is. So it's unnecessary to place a ward in that location. Never place wards unnecessarily, especially if your jungler doesn't take Tracker's Knife, is what I mentioned. You're playing Rammus, and so I recommend that you do take Tracker's Knife for the additional wards over Chilling Smite. This is especially beneficial where you're protecting a lane. If you're protecting a lane, you are able to apply more wards in the area, and you might even be able to place wards in the enemy jungle, which is what I mentioned here. Always place wards in the enemy jungle if you're invading, and it's very helpful in determining the enemy jungle's pathing. When they walk across the wards, they're able to see where they are, and so you'll be able to know where they're able to make their next move or take a next objective. And so, however, if you were playing a jungler other than Rammus, let's say like Warwick, then I would recommend that you especially not place your wards in positions like that where it's unnecessary, as you do not have the extra wards to back it up. I will show you where macro tip number 13 is mentioned. I believe you end up going in the jungle of the enemy. Yes, you're pathing through the jungle, you end up taking his red buff because you know that Yavin just died. This is fine. However, I don't think you end up placing any wards in his jungle. And I'm sure you have a ward up. If you had Tracker's Knife, you would definitely have wards up. So you should have placed a set of wards in his jungle. If not a set, at least one ward, so you're able to see him where he next appears on the map. And he is most likely to path through the top side, knowing that he was just bot side. And and so he's most likely to path here, and if you had placed the ward, you would have seen where he was on the map. Vision is key to winning games. Never underestimate the ability of a ward or a set of wards, especially since you would have the Rune Zombie ward to benefit you in the game. Another thing I'll mention, as is not shown in the Pacific replay, given the fact that the game isn't a long game and it's a small of a stomp on your side, I would say you should always look for ganks when you have achieved a level rather than continuing to farm. You can monitor your level by this purple bar on the bottom. This purple bar, when filled, shows that you have leveled up, and levels are very important in the entire game. Leveling up increases your armor, increases your magic resistance, so it increases all your resistances and also increases your HP. Not only that, increases your ability levels since you're leveling them up. And so when you're done taking a specific level advantage, you should end up to try and find a gank potential. If you're able to find a gank potential, you might be more beneficial doing this than farming. However, if you see no ganks possible, it's fine to continue farming. We're now coming to the end of this replay analysis. However, I want to discuss the macro tips 15 and 16. I will go to around 12 minutes of the replay to discuss this last tip. Sorry, around 13 minutes. Your bottom lane ends up getting some kills, and you go to take the objective bot, which is perfectly fine. This emphasizes what I mean by always take objectives when you can take the objectives. After you have killed enemies, you should always apply this information. After you've killed a set of enemies, go and take an objective. Never just kill enemies and do nothing with it. Once you are able to remove enemies from the map, you should try to see the next objective you can take. This includes Dragon, this includes Rift Herald, this includes Towers, and all objectives. Additionally, I recommend you take control wards for each objective you're taking, given that it is Dragon, Baron, or Rift Herald. And you should place these wards efficiently. What I mean by placing the ward efficiently is you should place the specific control ward right in the center of here. By placing the control ward here, you're able to deny vision from here and in here, and you're able to see any wards that are in this pit by the enemy. And so you're able to disguise the enemy's vision, and so able to take the camp, or rather the objective, successfully without any fears. And so you should have told your team as soon as they took this tower, should have pinged assistance on Dragon. You end up taking the Dragon at this moment. However, this might not have happened if the game wasn't a stomp, as it is in this specific game. You need to take the initiative and ping for assistance on objectives after killing enemies. You should not force getting specific objectives if it is not possible. However, if you see it possible, you should immediately go to get the objective. Lastly, I will talk about macro tip number 16. Or lastly, in number 15, also if your champion has the ability to solo an objective, this is more beneficial for yourself. What I mean by this is you might be able to pop this red plant, which is here, and go over the dragon pit and place a control ward in here and clear the camp by yourself, or rather the objective. Champions which are capable of doing this include Shyvana, Warwick, Shaco, and many others. Rammus is not as effective in clearing a dragon early into the game, or even Reparal. However, other junglers are capable of doing this. And so if you're able to solo an objective, you should go ahead and do it if you are aware of the enemy positions and you have a control ward. Lastly, what is not shown in the Pacific replay, however, given that your other laners aren't gankable, you should protect your snowballed laner with wards, and or look to calm the enemy to put your laner further ahead while the enemy is put further behind. What I mean by this is if your laner has a huge lead, which in this specific replay, your mid laners and your top and your bottom laner are very ahead in comparison to your top laner, you should be able to place wards around the area. This can include the river bushes, any enemy jungle itself, and so you're able to control the area. And by controlling the area, you're able to give your allies space to improve their snowball and their lead advantage. And so, by doing this, they are able to increase the snowball and attain more towers and therefore obtain more gold. In addition to this, you might even be able to camp your laners that are snowballing. By this, camp the enemy, and by doing this, you're able to put your lane even more ahead, even though they are already ahead. And not only are you putting your lane more ahead, you're also putting the enemy even further behind. You need to consider this. And so, this is only applicable if you have one lane which is extremely snowballed and your other lanes do not require ganks or aren't gankable, given the Pacific minion placement I've discussed. This is pretty much all I have to talk about in this replay. I've already gone through the rest of the 24 minutes of the replay, and I've realized there's not much other information to discuss. So I have placed at the end of the Word document, or rather in the footer, an analysis end at 13 minutes. At this specific point, there's no other information to discuss. The most important point of a jungler is in, I would say, the first 15 minutes of the game. If you're able to control the first 15 minutes of the game, you can control the entire game as a jungler. All you need to do after that is apply the first macro tip I discussed, which talks about the pre-game analysis and game plan. And so you'll know which lanes to gank, you'll know how to team fight given the Pacific enemy champions and allied champions. I haven't really gone into too much detail. However, in this specific game, you look at the team compositions. Your team is very good at team fighting. The enemy team is also decently good at team fighting. However, your team is a stronger team fight potential given that you have a lot more CC. Actually, both teams have a lot of CC, but in certain games it will not be even levels, and so you need to determine what is your team comp very good at doing. I can discuss more about this in a further replay analysis, or you might even be able to check out my other replay where I just talk about Plat 5 Lee Sin, and I mentioned all the information regarding team compositions and analysis prior to the start of a game. To close off, I will talk about the positives of this specific replay I've noticed. I noticed that your pinging is very good. I have not really seen other junglers ping very often. This is a very important quality a jungler should have. You need to warn your laners where the enemy jungler is, and you also need to tell them when you're going to engage, and you need to inform them of everything you're going to do. The only thing I would say regarding pinging is you should ping more for assistance, as with objective control like clearing dragon or Rift Herald. And your ganking is okay. It isn't bad, however, you can improve it by improving your pathing on Rammus, as I have discussed, and everything else as a whole. This is all I have to talk about in this specific replay analysis. I would like to thank you for listening, and I hope to help you improve again in the future. Thanks for watching. See you all again later. Bye.